The Jets lose to the Rams and show once again that running it back in 2025 is just not a viable option because this team does not play complementary football. In fact, this team plays anti-complementary football. Let's talk about it today on LockOn Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, December 23rd, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. This season, you can get a big return on FanDuel because new customers can place a $5 bet. You'll get started with $250 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, it's Monday, which means, as usual, we have a Jets loss to break down. Last week, we had a brief reprieve when the Jets beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. We actually had a Monday show where we could break down a win, but now we're back to our normal ways. We're breaking down a Jets loss as they were defeated yesterday by the Los Angeles Rams, 19-9 at MetLife Stadium. And with that loss, I think it also means we can say goodbye to the run-it-back era. There was a one-week stretch there where Jets fans were talking about running it back next year, bringing back Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams and trying it with this crew one more time. I think we could probably put that to bed now. I don't think it was ever really a viable option because despite a last-minute win over the Jacksonville Jaguars, we have seen irrefutable proof that this is a really, really bad football team. The Jets are now 4-11, and they're every bit as bad as that record indicates. This is not a team that's bad because of its offense, and the Jets did not lose because of their offense yesterday. They did not lose because of their defense. They did not lose because of their special teams. They did not lose because they're talent deficient in some areas. They lost because of all this stuff. And that's been one of the stories all season long. Whenever somebody talks about the Kansas City Chiefs, somebody will inevitably say, whenever they need to make a play, somebody steps up. And for the Jets, it's the opposite. Whenever they need to lose a game, whenever the game's on the line, somebody doesn't step up or somebody messes up a big play. Because this team doesn't lose because of one specific area. This is not the Cincinnati Bengals where they have a great offense and they just lose because of their defense. This is a team that's bad across the board. And we saw that once again in this game against the Rams. And there's a phrase that you hear from time to time, complementary football. And that means the team has some sort of bigger picture where the various parts of their team are working together. There are weeks where you don't necessarily have the offense running its best plays. The offense's goal is not necessarily to put as many points on the board as possible. And the defense's main goal is not necessarily to get a 3-and-out as quickly as possible. And you might wonder why that is. You might say that's an odd thing to say. You might even doubt me. The Rams actually showed you the benefits of playing complementary football. And if you heard our crossover show this week with Travis Rogers, who's the co-host of Locked On Rams, he made a really interesting point. And that point actually resonated with me a lot after the game ended. And I started thinking about what the Rams did in this game because Travis Rogers noted that for the Rams' hopes of winning the NFC West, this was actually the least important of their three remaining games because they have a couple of games left in Week 17 and Week 18 against divisional opponents. And that's really where the division will be won. He mentioned that, he didn't think the Rams were going to put a lot of crazy stuff on film. He thought they wanted to save their best stuff for the last two games of the season, which will really be where the NFC West is decided. And after the game, I sat and I thought about it. I said, you know what? The Rams went into MetLife Stadium and they said, we don't need to do anything crazy to win because on both sides of the ball, that was as vanilla of a game plan as you can get. The Rams rarely blitzed in this game. They took some very deep zone drops. They were willing to just give the Jets everything underneath through much of the first half and then deep into the second half. On offense, well, they threw the ball 19 times. They ran the ball 31 times, and their passing game was pretty rudimentary. I mean, there were lots of screens, lots of bootlegs with very simple reads. It was about as basic of a game plan as you could get on both sides of the ball. If you were watching the Los Angeles Rams yesterday, I don't think you came away thinking that they ran a game plan that maximized the number of points they could get. I don't think you came away thinking they ran a game plan that minimized the other team's offensive production, even though they did hold the Jets to 9 points. They came out with as vanilla of a game plan as possible. It wasn't really a secret what they were doing on either side of the ball. Really what they essentially said was the Jets are so bad, we can run this vanilla game plan. We don't need to put anything crazy on film. We don't need to put our best stuff on film and let it tip off our opponents the next 2 weeks. We'll run the most basic stuff possible. The Jets will know it's coming, and we'll still win because first of all, we're better than them. And second of all, the Jets will mess up. The Jets will fail to execute and key points. And that's exactly what happened in this game. And you look at what the Jets did. I mean, the Jets put up 9 points in this game. The Jets played bad defense. Now, I know both Rams touchdowns were set up on a short field. One was when the Jets went for it on a 4th down and missed in the first half deep in their own territory. The second was the Aaron Rodgers strip sack and fumble, which was a terrible play by Rodgers. And we'll talk plenty about Rodgers ahead here on the show. But the Rams ran the most basic game plan possible. And the Jets are a team that's been losing games all season long. And here's the thing with the Jets. You can't pinpoint what's wrong because there's so many things. And every week there's something new that pops up that costs them a game. And this week it was a little bit of everything. It was the offense, which averaged 3 yards per play in the second half. Aaron Rodgers, who played pretty well in the first half, in the second half, averaging only 5 yards per attempt and really just kind of getting tunnel vision, throwing the ball to Devontae Adams. Special teams, missed extra point, missed field goal, one of the stories of the season. And the problem with the Jets is I think there's a temptation to say, well, if they just made their kicks, they'd be in the playoff race. Yeah, but that's kind of missing the point. There are a lot of games the Jets should never have come down to a field goal if the offense played well or the defense played well. And also those units are just bad. The offense isn't good. The offense put up 30 points last week for the first time all season long. They came back and put up 9 points. And I know some people will point to the kicker missing a field goal. Some people will point to the 4th downs they went to where maybe they could have kicked a field goal. Hey, look, this offense put the ball in the end zone once. And they had a lot of extra chances to do it because Jeff Ulbrich was very aggressive going for it on 4th downs. And there's a lot you can get on Jeff Ulbrich for. I have to say, I did not disagree with any of the 4th downs he wanted for. Even the one in the first half when they were in their own territory. And I know the Jets were up at the time. You could say, well, the flow of the game, was going in the Jets' direction. Look, the Jets are a bad team. They had to try and steal a possession somewhere. I have no issue with it. They're 4-10. What difference does it make? I have no issue with Ulbrich being aggressive. And I try and judge these coaching decisions based on how I felt in the moment because it's very easy to look back and say if they didn't make it, it was a bad decision. If they made it, it was a good decision. I had no issue with the decisions Ulbrich made. And I know a lot of people say they should have. Look, all I know is 3 years ago, Ron Middleton was the substitute coach for a game when Robert Saleh had COVID and went for it a bunch in a game against Jacksonville. It was right around 3 years ago. Right around three years ago this time. It was right around Christmas. Everybody loved Ron Middleton because the Jets made it every time they went on 4th down. If Jets made it yesterday, everybody would love Jeff Ulbrich's aggressiveness. But we know Ulbrich's not doing a good coaching job. We know the Jets are very poorly coached. You see it time and again with the lack of fundamentals. The offense is bad. The defense is bad. The special teams are bad. It's just a bad football team. It's not a team that's close. It's not a team it's not a team that can win without major changes. They have earned this 4-11 record, and they don't play complementary football. Yesterday, when the defense was undermanned without Quinn and Williams, what did they do? Aaron Rodgers fumbles the ball away in a tie game in the 4th quarter. When the offense gives the ball away, what does the defense do? Twice backed up, they give up touchdowns. They let the Rams run all over them. Does the special teams pick anybody up? Special teams are where hidden points are found, especially when your team's struggling. You can find hidden points, hidden yardage. What does the special teams do? They miss a field goal, they miss an extra point, and then it didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because it happened with a minute and a half left. The Jets were down 10 without timeouts. Xavier Gipson muffs a punt, gives it away, which is kind of emblematic of the Jets continually running Xavier Gipson out there as a return guy, even though he gives you nothing. Xavier Gipson is living off a return last year in week 1 against the Buffalo Bills where he won the game. And he'll always live in Jets lore from that moment. But at some point you have to say, what have you done for me in the last year and a half, last 2 years? Xavier Gipson's done nothing since that Buffalo game. It's a bad football team. This is not a quick fix. The team just cannot run it back. And here on the LockOn Jets podcast, we'll talk about the main man in the run it back argument, Aaron Rodgers. Up and down game against the Rams, a game that was there to be won, though. He didn't win it. What does this game mean for his future? Well, it shouldn't mean a whole lot because I think the decision with him is pretty straightforward. And we'll talk about that decision as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is sponsored by Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy. Whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports, Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30+ million in rewards during Pickmas and offering 2 free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL, to get $50 instantly after your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Jets lost yesterday to the Los Angeles Rams. The final score was 19-9 at MetLife Stadium. Jets offense held to 9 points, and some missed field goals, some fourth downs that they missed, but only one touchdown in this game against a team that, again, that was playing pretty soft defense. And once again, as always, a lot of attention is paid to the quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. Now, I'm going to sit here and tell you, Aaron Rodgers was not the definitive reason the Jets lost this game. In fact, if we're talking about who's to blame, I'm not sure he's at the top of the list. But after a first half where he played pretty well, and look, I don't think he was doing anything spectacular in the first half outside of the touchdown pass to Davante Adams. That was a great throw, really incredible. That was an on-the-money throw. Other than that, he was kind of taking what the Rams were giving him because, again, the Rams were playing very soft coverage. Rams were just trying to prevent the big play because the Rams are pretty much – I think what the Rams pretty much realize is that this Jets team, if they have to drive the ball 10, 11, 12 plays down the field, they're going to mess up somewhere along the line. This is not a team that can execute 10 straight plays. And the Rams were right. And this was an interesting game because in the first 47 minutes of this game, there were only 8 possessions. These were very long possessions. And 6 of those 8 possessions went to at least 10 plays. So nobody was really producing splash plays. Again, in the first 47 minutes, no play went for more than 20 yards from scrimmage. Defenses were not forcing 3 and outs because, again, 6 of the 8 drives had at least 10 plays on them. But the scoring was low. Rams had 1 touchdown. Jets had 1 touchdown. In the first half, Aaron Rodgers was playing pretty decently. And then the second half came, and he went back to being the Aaron Rodgers we've seen for much of the season, where there was a lot of miscommunication with his receivers, including Davante Adams, the guy he has such chemistry with, the guy he's played with for so long. There was an over-focus on getting the ball to Davante Adams that came at the expense of a lot of other receivers, most notably Garrett Wilson, who, until the Jets' final offensive drive, only had 3 targets all game. And there were some key moments, including a fourth down where he was open, but Rodgers just had tunnel vision with Davante Adams. And then he took a really bad sack and fumbled the ball away in a tie game in the fourth quarter. And the Jets ended up giving up a touchdown after that, and Rodgers ended up getting injured. And there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, look, again, I'm not saying he's the only reason the Jets are losing. That would be completely inaccurate to say. But he played a role in the Jets losing this game. And his stats is 28 for 42, 256 yards. That's only 6.1 per attempt. And again, there was a clear difference in the first half and the second half. First half, he was around 7 yards per attempt, which is fine. Second half, he was around 5. That's not good enough. And that's been one of the stories of the season. Rodgers playing very inefficient, ineffective football. And the first half was kind of the guy we saw against Miami, and then late in the Jacksonville game. The second half was the guy we've seen through most of the season. But just as tellingly is he limped off the field after taking that hit with the bad sack he took. And this has been one of the stories of the season for Rodgers, and it's been one of the stories of the last couple of seasons. He's had trouble staying healthy, and that's not unnatural. That's just the reality of being 41 in the NFL. You get to a certain age, your body just can't absorb the hits. And I think, the running back argument, I think, is misplaced in a lot of areas. But the number one area it's misplaced, I believe, is in the idea that it's a good bet that Aaron Rodgers can hold up over the course of a long season. When I sit here and say Aaron Rodgers should not come back next season, that's not to say Aaron Rodgers is incapable of playing a good game, because we've seen him play a good game. We've seen him play good games the last 2 weeks leading into this one. That's not to say he's incapable of playing well over the course of a game, over a stretch within a game. He played well in the first half. That's not saying he's incapable of putting multiple good games together. He did it against Miami and Jacksonville, and then a good first half here. The issue is I don't think he's capable of holding up over the course of a 17-game season, because a lot of the arguments about bringing Rodgers back is essentially based on the idea that we haven't seen the real Rodgers, that he was banged up early in the season. He was dealing with the knee, the hamstring, the ankle, and finally Rodgers is healthy, and now you're getting good results. There's probably some truth to that. I think that the Aaron Rodgers of the last 3 weeks moved better than the Aaron Rodgers we've seen most of the season was incapable of moving. He was essentially a statue back there. The Aaron Rodgers of the last couple of weeks has been able to move within the pocket. He's been able to break the pocket at times. If he's seen something down the field, he could break left or right. I don't know if he can outrun defensive linemen the way he used to, but there's the Aaron Rodgers of the last couple of weeks has mobility. He has some functional mobility. The Aaron Rodgers of most of the season didn't. And I think maybe a lot of that was due to injuries. The thing is, though, I don't know what basis we have at 41 to expect him to stay healthy through a whole season, because he hasn't been healthy this year. Last year, freak injury, but only played 4 plays. 2 years ago, the excuse for his lack of production in Green Bay, his final season with the Packers, was that he was banged up. Players are more likely to get injured as they age. Players' bodies aren't as durable as they age. Players have a tougher time recovering from week to week as they age. And this doesn't even go into all the other factors like the salary cap space or Rodgers' position within the organization, because I think it's very difficult to expect Aaron Rodgers at this point, after you spend 2 years building everything around him, to be one of the guys. I think it's very difficult to come up with a scenario where you bring Aaron Rodgers back and you don't bring Devontae Adams back. And then you're talking about $75 million going to a 41 to 42-year-old quarterback and a 32 to 33-year-old receiver. There are all these other issues with bringing Rodgers back. But the number one issue I see is that while he can still play a good game, I don't think he can stay healthy over the course of a whole season. And even if he's playing hurt, you see he's not the guy he's used to be. You see he's not close to being the guy he used to be. And that was true in this game, but it was even he wasn't even playing that well while he was healthy. You've seen the age start to add up. And yeah, like many of the Jets teams, there are flashes where things look good. There are flashes where it looks good for the offense. There are flashes where it looks good for the defense. There are flashes where the special teams even plays well. But that doesn't make you a good team. I think all 32 teams in the league have flashes where they look good. Like, you could take the worst team in the league. They're probably, if not the worst team in the league, almost like maybe 30 out of the 32 teams, they'll have flashes within games every single week where they look good. That doesn't mean that you're on your way to doing anything. It just means that you have guys who are talented enough to play in the NFL. And if you're talented enough to play in the NFL, you'll have moments where you look like you're capable. Aaron Rodgers had moments where he looked like he was capable in this game. We don't need, his reputation precedes itself. The guy is going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks who's ever set foot on an NFL field. But he's not the guy you want playing quarterback for you right now, especially on this New York Jets team where you don't really have a lot else working for you, where you don't have a good defense. You don't have a good special teams. Everything's bad about this team right now. Unfortunately, I don't think the quarterback's very good either. And I think that you saw many reasons why the Jets simply cannot run it back. Now, here on the LockOn Jets podcast, we'll close out our show and we'll talk about some of the lingering developments from this game. What could impact the Jets' future? There are a couple things to talk about. Keep your eye on as we continue here on this Monday edition of LockOn Jets. Today's episode of LockOn Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways to help you pick up a W. You may love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. It can be thrilling. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. Jets heading to Buffalo this weekend for a game against the Bills. I can't say I'm very optimistic about that one. I don't care what you're talking about. I'm not optimistic about the Jets' offense against the Bills, not optimistic against their defense, not optimistic they'll win. I'm sure the Bills are going to be heavy favorites in that one. Well, maybe you disagree with me. I don't know why you would, but if you do disagree with me, Or maybe you want to bet on the Bills. FanDuel's the place to get in on the action. Just visit FanDuel.com today. That's FanDuel.com for your choice at $250 for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the National Football League. This is the Locked On Jets podcast. Here on this Monday, we're breaking down the Jets' 19-9 loss over against the Los Angeles Rams in Week 16 action. If you're traveling today for the holidays, please be safe out there. I'm actually traveling myself. In fact, by the time you listen to this podcast, I might be in the air. I'm heading out to the West Coast to spend time with family in California. So again, please travel safe if you're on the road for the holiday. Jets lost to the Rams. I think we know this game is not important itself. What's the real difference between being 5-10 versus 4-11? Not that great. Maybe some draft positioning, maybe a fun Sunday or something like that. But we know this loss doesn't have big implications for the Jets. There are a couple of things to keep an eye on, though, from after this game. One is the status of Olu Fashanu. If you're watching the game, you saw that he left in the second half. Unfortunately, had to be carted off with what was termed as a foot injury. A tough break. I did a recap show last night, and I talked about how sad I was to see that happen, because in a lost season, one of the few things you get to enjoy is seeing young players develop. And Olu Fashanu had really started to turn a corner. And you saw early in the season, he was a young guy who was struggling. And it's easy to dismiss it. It's easy to say, well, he wasn't playing his natural position. And that's true. He was playing a little right tackle when Morgan Moses got injured. He was playing some guard when the Jets had to shuffle some guys because of some injuries on the interior. But he also just looked overmatched. I didn't think it was really about him not playing a natural position. And I think that there are guys who are plug-and-play guys day one. Then we always talk about this guy needs a year. And then there are guys who kind of fall in between. There's certain guys who maybe aren't ready week one of their rookie year, but they practice a little bit, and by mid-season, they're ready to go. And that's Olu Fashanu. I have to be honest with you. When Tyron Smith went down, my view was that he would be a guy who would benefit from the reps, but he would struggle. He hasn't struggled. He hasn't struggled at all. In fact, he hasn't just held his own. He was playing really well. I think one of the stories of this game for the Jets, especially in the first half, was the play of their offensive line. There were a couple penalties along the way, one of which was on Fashanu that wasn't really his fault, because just kind of changed the play on the fly. He thought he was run blocking, and it was a pass, and he got called for an ineligible downfield. It really was nobody's fault. It was just an unfortunate turn of events. But Aaron Rodgers had all day to throw through much of the first half. Averaged 2.92 yards per 2.92 seconds from snap to attempt, which is longer than he's been through much of the season. Rams only sacked him once. I thought it was an outstanding performance by the Jets offensive line in this game. Now, the Rams rarely blitzed, but Jets held their own up front, and I think Olu Fashanu was part of that. And he's just been really good the last couple of weeks. It's tough to see him leave the game. I think, again, one of the reasons you watch at this point is you want to see young players get a chance to develop and move forward. And Olu Fashanu has been benefiting from the reps. I think this playing time he's gotten this year since Tyron Smith went down is going to help him in 2025 and 2026 and 2027 and the rest of his career. There's no replacement for game reps, especially in the current NFL, where the practices just don't simulate games the way they used to. There's an argument that a lot of coaches make that you can only develop players in games at this point because you can't really hit in practice anymore. And Olu Fashanu was playing so well. It's really tough to see him go down. I hope he's okay. It sounds like it was relatively serious. It's always a warning sign when a player gets carted off the field. It's a foot injury, so it's not a knee, which maybe that's a good thing. We'll see what happens with Olu, but I wish him a speedy recovery. I don't know if we're going to see him again the rest of the year because there's only 2 games left, and we saw Max Mitchell really struggle, and we've seen Max Mitchell really struggle through most of his career. I don't know Max Mitchell's really going to benefit from any reps, but we can hope for the best from Olu Fashanu. Another thing worth watching, and this kind of got on the radar this week, and it's going to be magnified by the way the game went, is you started to hear some rumblings about Garrett Wilson potentially wanting a trade at the end of the season. Now, this was kind of thin stuff. It's one of those people close to him think maybe he's going to ask for a trade. But then later in the week, Garrett Wilson said, Garrett Wilson did not give us a firm yes when he was asked if he wanted to be here. And then this game, Aaron Rodgers kind of ignored him. Aaron Rodgers was really focused on throwing the ball to Davante Adams, especially in moments where maybe Garrett Wilson was open. And, this was not the kind of thing you wanted to see in a week of what has been a week of turmoil. After the game, Garrett Wilson had some things that statements that could be easily construed as him being frustrated. He said, "I like to be involved, love to make an impact on the game, but people see it differently. That's out of my control." He also posted to social media. You can go see what he posted on social media. Also was asked about Mike LaFleur. Now, the Jets' former offensive coordinator, Mike LaFleur, was at the game because he's the Rams' offensive coordinator now. He was the Jets' offensive coordinator in 2021 and 2022. 2022 was Garrett Wilson's rookie season. Garrett Wilson talked about how he liked LaFleur. He kind of became wistful talking about the LaFleur days and kind of mentioned, I didn't appreciate what I had back then, which could be construed as Garrett Wilson maybe not being happy right now. He's not expressly saying anything. There is some smoke picking up here, though. And you're starting to see, the old expression, when there's smoke, there's fire. There's a lot of smoke around Garrett Wilson right now. And I don't know where this is going to lead, but I think after the week, the stuff that just keeps coming up in the media, the game that he had where, again, he was kind of an afterthought in the Jets offensive attack, and everything he's saying and posting after the game, we'll see what happens here. I hope that this has a happy ending for the Jets because Garrett Wilson's a great receiver. And I think Jets priority number one this offseason should be locking up Garrett Wilson long-term. After his third season, he's eligible for a contract extension. He's eligible to, get a payday. I think that Jets should look to take care of, because it's been a long time since the Jets had a receiver like Garrett Wilson. Been a long time since the Jets drafted a receiver like Garrett Wilson. Not a guy you want to mess around with, guy you want to make sure he's here long-term, but you're hearing some things and you're seeing some things now that are at least a little alarming. I'm not ready to say it's all over. I'm not here to create panic. What I'll say is that I do think it's fair to be a little alarmed based on some of the stuff we're hearing from Garrett, because it just, again, whether there's smoke, there's fire. There's a lot of smoke right now around Garrett Wilson. So hopefully, these are two situations that I hope resolve themselves in a good way for the Jets: an injury and then a player whose status with the team is not entirely clear going forward. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the LockOn Jets podcast, part of the LockOn Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. Again, if you're traveling, please be safe today. If you see me on the airplane, feel free to say hi. We'll chat again tomorrow. We'll talk about the Jets again tomorrow on Christmas Eve.